Nobody knew it then.
But that empty plate sitting in front of an old woman at a table full of steaming food was not just hunger. It was the beginning of an empire's collapse.
Subscribe.
Hit that notification bell, because what happens in this story, you will carry with you for the rest of your life. This house was built with love, real love, the kind that comes from hands that have never been soft a day in their life. His name was Emmanuel Adeyemi. 40 years ago, he stepped off a plane from Lagos, Nigeria with $180 in his pocket and something unbreakable in his chest. He started as a construction worker, up at 5 in the morning, still working at midnight. His hands cracked in the winter cold. His back ached from years of lifting what other men wouldn't touch. But he never complained, not once. Because every brick he laid, every foundation he poured, every building he helped raise from nothing, he was doing it for one reason: his family. 10 years later, he started his own construction company. 15 years later, he was one of the most respected contractors in Houston. 20 years later, that man, the same man who once slept on a cot in a work trailer, bought a beautiful home in one of the finest neighborhoods in the city. And he furnished every single room for one person: his mother, Grace. Grace Adeyemi, 78 years old. Small frame, white hair cut close to her head, deep brown eyes that had seen more of this world than most people could imagine. She was the woman who had raised Emmanuel alone, who had split a single piece of bread in half and given him the bigger piece while she called herself full, who had worked 2 jobs, walked miles in worn-out shoes, and never once let her son see her cry. Every Sunday morning, Emmanuel would go to her room and make her coffee himself. 2 sugars, a little cream, exactly the way she liked it. "Without you, I'm nothing," he always told her. She would smile. "You are everything," she would say back. And for 8 years, that house was exactly what Emmanuel had built it to be:
Warm, full, safe.
Until Daniel brought Vivian home. Daniel was Emmanuel's only son, 32 years old. He looked like his father, but carried none of what made his father great. Where Emmanuel was disciplined, Daniel was careless. Where Emmanuel was humble, Daniel was arrogant. Where Emmanuel had earned everything, Daniel had simply received it. And 3 months ago, Daniel had gotten married to Vivian Torres, 29. Tall, polished, every smile precisely timed. The kind of woman who never said the wrong thing out loud, but whose eyes were always calculating something. The first time Grace met Vivian, something tightened in her chest. She couldn't name it. She didn't say it out loud, because her son was happy, and a mother's job is to protect her son's happiness. But Grace had seen it. That flicker in Vivian's eyes the moment she walked through the front door of that house. Not wonder, not warmth.
Want.
After the wedding, Vivian moved in. And slowly, quietly, the house began to change. First, it was Grace's corner chair. The one she'd sat in every morning for 8 years, right by the window where the light came in.
Gone.
"It's outdated," Vivian said. Grace said nothing. Then the spice rack. Grace's spices, brought over from Lagos, lined up on the shelf the way she'd always kept them. Removed. "The smell bothers me," Vivian said. Grace said nothing. Then the photographs. Emmanuel as a boy. Grace as a young woman, standing proud outside a small Lagos apartment. Taken down. "They make the walls look cluttered," Vivian said. Grace said nothing. And then Emmanuel left for Dallas. A 3-day business trip. 3 days. That was all it took. Emmanuel had been gone for 3 hours. Grace came downstairs to start dinner. She opened the refrigerator. She pulled out what she needed. She set a pot on the stove. Vivian appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her voice was sweet. Her eyes were not. "Grace, I'll be handling dinner tonight." "Sweetheart, I do this every night. Go sit down, rest."
No.
The sweetness was gone. "This is my home. I'll be making dinner." Grace looked at her for a long moment. Then she set everything down, and she walked out of the kitchen. When dinner was ready, Grace came downstairs and took her seat at the table. Vivian brought out the food. A full plate for Daniel. Chicken, rice, vegetables, bread, a glass of water. A full plate for herself. And for Grace, nothing. Grace waited. Maybe she forgot, she thought. Maybe she's coming back. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Daniel had already started eating. Vivian wasn't looking at her. Vivian, the food, Grace began. There might be something in the kitchen, Vivian said. Eyes still down. Voice flat. Grace pushed back her chair, walked to the kitchen. Every pot had been washed and put away. The food, all of it, had been scooped into storage containers and locked in the refrigerator. Grace stood in that kitchen and looked at those empty pots. She turned around. On the counter sat a single half loaf of stale bread. That was it. Grace picked it up. She walked upstairs to her room. She sat in the dark, and she ate that stale bread alone. She didn't cry, because Grace Adeyemi had survived harder things than this. But this was different. This was her son's house, the house he built for her, and she was eating stale bread in the dark. There was one more person at that table, Marcus Webb, Emmanuel's business partner, 45 years old, quiet, steady, the kind of man who watched everything and said very little. He'd come by that evening to drop off some paperwork. Vivian had insisted he stay for dinner. Marcus watched Grace go to the kitchen. He watched her come back. He saw the stale bread in her hand. He watched her climb those stairs, that small, tired, dignified body, and disappear into the hallway above. Daniel was laughing at something Vivian had said. Neither of them looked up. Marcus looked down at his plate. Then he stood up quietly. "Thank you for dinner," he said. His voice was steady. His jaw was tight. He walked out to his car, but he didn't drive away. He sat in the dark for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone, and he started typing.
Date. Time.
What he had seen. Because Marcus Webb had learned something a long time ago. The people who stay silent when they witness cruelty are not innocent bystanders. They are participants. And he refused to participate. Emmanuel came home. Everything looked fine. Vivian was smiling. Grace was quiet. "Mama, how are you doing?" Emmanuel asked. "I'm fine, baby," Grace said. Because that's what mothers say. They protect their children, even when their children need to be told the truth. But Marcus was watching. The following week, Emmanuel was out of town again. Marcus stopped by for a meeting and stayed long enough to see Grace's place at the table sit empty while everyone else ate. The week after that, Emmanuel was away again. Marcus came to the front door at 8 in the evening. Vivian answered. "Marcus? Emmanuel isn't here." "I know. I wanted to check on Grace." Vivian's face tightened.
Why?
"I had an old friend," Marcus said. "Grace reminds me of her. I just wanted to say hello." He went upstairs. He knocked on Grace's door. "Come in." She was sitting on the edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap, that same stale bread on the nightstand beside her. Marcus didn't say anything right away. He set a bag down on the dresser. Inside was a full hot meal, Lego style, the kind of food that takes hours to make right. Grace looked at the bag. Then she looked at him. "How did you know?" she asked softly. "My mother loved this too," he said. Grace's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "Sit down," she said. "Eat with me." And for 2 hours, Marcus sat with Grace Adeyemi in that room while the rest of the house moved around them. She told him about Legos, about raising Emmanuel alone, about the years of sacrifice, the hunger, the pride, the love that had carried them both across an ocean to this house. Marcus listened to every word, and he wrote down everything, because something had become very clear to him. Grace wasn't just a woman being mistreated in someone else's home. Grace was the reason this home existed, and someone was going to answer for what was being done to her. For weeks later, Emmanuel came home from Dallas. There was an envelope on the kitchen table, from Marcus. Emmanuel opened it. Inside were photographs,
Dates.
timestamps, for weeks of documentation, recorded night after night with the quiet precision of a man who understood exactly what he was doing and why. And a letter. "Emmanuel, you built this house for your mother, but your mother is going hungry inside it. Every night you're away. I'm telling you because you cannot make a decision without knowing the truth. And I cannot stay silent while I know the truth. You deserve better. She deserves better. What you do next is up to you." Emmanuel read it once. He read it again. He set it down on the table. He climbed the stairs. He knocked on his mother's door. Grace opened it. Emmanuel looked at her face, really looked at it for what felt like the first time in months. Her cheeks were thinner. Her eyes were tired. But her voice, when she spoke, was steady as ever. "Baby, what's wrong?" Emmanuel's knees nearly gave out. He sat on the edge of her bed and took both her hands in his. And this man who had built a company from nothing, who had poured concrete in the freezing cold and negotiated million-dollar contracts in boardrooms, he broke down and wept.
Mama.
"I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know." Grace put her hand on top of his. She held it there. "I know, baby," she said quietly. "I know you didn't." They came downstairs together. Vivian was in the kitchen. Emmanuel sat down at the table. "Vivian," she turned. Something shifted behind her eyes. "Tell me something," Emmanuel said. His voice was low, controlled. The kind of controlled that is more frightening than anger. "What has my mother eaten in this house over the last 4 weeks?" The color drained from Vivian's face. She had access to the kitchen. She could have. "That's enough." Emmanuel stood. He called Marcus. "Marcus, you remember the character clause in our partnership agreement?" "I remember it. Clear your schedule for tomorrow morning." He hung up. Vivian stepped toward him. "Emmanuel, please. Just let me explain." He turned to face her, and what she saw in his eyes stopped her completely. Not rage. Something quieter than rage. Grief. "I built this house," he said. "Every room, every window, every corner of it. I built for her, because she went hungry, so I could eat. She walked in broken shoes, so I could go to school. She gave up everything so I could become something. And you came into this house, and you made her eat stale bread alone in the dark." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean." "You knew exactly what you meant," Emmanuel said. "Every single night." The next morning, Marcus sat across from Emmanuel in their office. "Why did you do it?" Emmanuel asked. "Why did you document everything?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Grace told me about Legos," he said. "She told me how she raised you alone, how she went days without eating so you could have food, how she split a piece of bread in half and told you she wasn't hungry."
He paused.
"And then I saw that same woman going hungry in the house her son built for her, in her own home." He shook his head. "I had a mother too, Emmanuel. I lost her, and I didn't do enough when she needed me. I made a promise I wouldn't let that happen to someone else's mother, not if I could stop it." The room was silent. Emmanuel sat with that for a long time. Then he reached across the desk and shook Marcus's hand. "We've been building this company for 10 years, Emmanuel said. "But I want to put something in the foundation, something my mother taught me without ever saying a word." He leaned forward. "No one goes hungry in anything we build. Not our employees, not our clients, not a stranger who walks through the door. There is always room at the table. Always." Marcus smiled. "That's why I've been your partner for 10 years." Vivian left. She packed one bag and walked out without a word. Daniel came to his father, head down, voice low. "Dad, I knew. I saw things. I didn't want to see it." Emmanuel looked at his son for a long time. "Knowing isn't enough," he said. "Seeing isn't enough. You have to act. That's the difference between a witness and a bystander." He put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Go sit with your grandmother. Listen to her. Learn from her. That's where everything that matters actually comes from." That evening, 3 people sat down to dinner. Emmanuel, Daniel,
And Grace.
The food was hot. The plates were full, cooked Lego style, the way Grace had always loved. Grace took her first bite. She closed her eyes. She smiled. And Emmanuel, sitting across from the woman who had sacrificed everything so he could have a life, felt something settle deep in his chest. Like a debt being acknowledged. Like a promise being kept. "Is it good, Mama?" "It's perfect, baby. From now on, every night is going to be like this." Grace reached across the table and took his hand. "I know," she said. "I always knew." Before we close, let me leave you with this. Grace never complained. Not once. Because that's what mothers do. They protect their children, even when their children need to know the truth. And that silence, that quiet, invisible suffering, is the most dangerous kind. Because no one can fix what no one will admit to. So look at the people around you. Really look. Count the plates. Read the eyes. Ask the questions others are afraid to ask. The second thing this story teaches us is that witnessing is a responsibility. Marcus could have looked away. He could have told himself it wasn't his place. But he understood something that most people don't. Staying silent in the face of cruelty is itself a choice. And it is never a neutral one. Third, everything has a reckoning. Vivian walked through that house like she owned it. But she never owned a single room. Not $1 of that life was hers. Because you cannot claim what was built by someone else's sacrifice. The foundation always belongs to the one who laid it. And finally, the most important lesson of all, there is always room at the table. Not just a dinner table. The table of your life. The table of your business. The table of your community. Make room. Because the person who needs a seat today may be the very person who built the table you're sitting at. Grace Adeyemi raised a son with nothing. And that son built an empire. And that empire's first rule, its foundation, was the lesson his mother taught him without ever having to say it out loud. No one goes hungry here. Not on my watch. Not in my house. Not ever again.